Following this discovery, scientists are beginning to question reality, and that's not good. Something has gone wrong with reality, and the most unsettling part is that no one can fully explain why. For centuries, science has been our way of grounding ourselves in the universe, a promise that no matter how vast or mysterious existence may be, there are rules, stable, predictable, unbreakable rules that hold everything together. The stars move in patterns, matter behaves according to laws, and reality unfolds whether we are here to witness it or not. But what if that last assumption is not true? What if reality does not simply exist on its own, but depends in some strange and uncomfortable way on being observed? This is no longer a philosophical thought experiment. It is a question emerging from real experiments. Experiments so precise, so controlled, that their results should have confirmed what we already believed. Instead, they revealed something else, something that does not fit. Particles that behave differently when observed. Outcomes that seem to change depending on whether someone is looking. Events that appear to ignore the order of time itself. And beneath all of this, a quiet implication begins to grow. The universe may not be what it appears to be. And if that is true, then everything built on top of that assumption, our understanding of space, time, and even our own existence, begins to feel less solid than we once thought. This is not just about physics. This is about the possibility that reality, at its deepest level, is not fixed, not independent, and not entirely separate from us. And once you begin to see it, it becomes impossible to ignore. Because the question is no longer whether reality is stable. The question is, what is reality doing when no one is looking? The moment reality blinked. There was a moment, quiet, controlled, almost invisible, when an experiment produced a result that should not have been possible. Nothing exploded, no alarm sounded, the world did not stop, and yet, in that moment, something fundamental slipped. In carefully designed quantum experiments, particles were sent through systems meant to reveal a simple truth: what they are and how they behave. But instead of giving consistent answers, the particles seemed to hesitate between possibilities, as if undecided, until the very instant they were observed. Before measurement, they did not behave like objects with defined properties. They existed in a spread of possibilities, a kind of suspended state where multiple outcomes coexisted. But the moment observation occurred, that ambiguity vanished. One reality emerged, the others disappeared. This alone would be strange enough. But what made it truly unsettling was not the behavior itself. It was the timing. In some variations of these experiments, the decision of how to observe the particle was made after it had already entered the system. And yet, somehow, the particle's earlier behavior aligned with that later decision, as if the future had reached backward, quietly adjusting the past. This is not how reality is supposed to work. We are taught that causes come before effects, that the present is shaped by the past, not the other way around. But here, in these controlled environments, reality seemed to blur that order, responding not just to what is, but to what will be observed. For a brief moment, it felt as if reality itself had paused, and then chosen a version of events. Not randomly, but in response to observation. And this is where the discomfort begins. Because if reality can remain undefined until it is observed, then what we call real may not exist in the way we think it does. It may not be a fixed stage where events unfold, but something far more delicate, something that depends on interaction, on measurement, on awareness, something that, in a very real sense, waits. And if that is true, then the universe is not simply happening around us. It is responding to us, the assumption that built our world. Before anything began to fracture, there was a quiet certainty that held everything together. It was never written in bold letters, never questioned in laboratories, never debated with urgency. It simply existed beneath every equation, every observation, every discovery. The assumption that reality exists, whether we are looking at it or not. This idea became the foundation of science. The belief that the universe is objective, stable, and independent. That a star continues to burn in the darkness, even if no eye has ever seen its light. That particles have properties, positions, and states long before any measurement is made. It feels obvious, almost undeniable, because our entire experience reinforces it. You walk into a room and expect the walls to be there. You close your eyes and trust that the world does not vanish. You leave an object behind and assume it remains exactly where you left it. Reality, as we understand it, does not depend on you. It simply is. And for centuries, this assumption worked. It allowed us to build models, predict outcomes, and uncover the laws that govern motion, energy, and matter. It gave us confidence that the universe could be understood piece by piece as something external, something separate from the observer. But hidden within that certainty was a silent vulnerability, because no one had ever truly proven that reality exists independently of observation. It was never something we tested. It was something we believed. And belief, even in science, can remain invisible until something challenges it. That challenge did not come as a contradiction at first. It appeared as a subtle inconsistency, a small deviation in expected results, a behavior that did not quite fit the model, easy to ignore, easy to explain away, until it wasn't. Because as experiments became more precise, as we began to isolate the smallest building blocks of existence, the universe stopped behaving like something that simply exists on its own. Instead, it began to behave like something that waits to be measured, waits to be defined, waits in a way that feels almost intentional for interaction. And this is where the old assumption begins to collapse. If reality were truly independent, it would not need us. It would not change based on how we look at it. It would not seem to hold multiple possibilities until observation forces a single outcome. But that is exactly what we are seeing, which raises a question that is difficult to accept and even harder to ignore. What if the universe we trusted, the one that exists whether we are here or not, was never quite as solid as we believed? What if reality, at its deepest level, is not something that simply exists, but something that becomes? When observation became participation. At first, observation seemed harmless, a passive act, a way of looking at something that was already there, already defined, already real. Science was built on this idea that we could study the universe without disturbing it, like watching a distant storm from a safe place. But at the smallest scales of reality, that separation begins to disappear. In certain experiments, particles do not behave like solid objects moving through space. They behave like waves of possibility, spreading out, existing in multiple states at once. Not here or there, but somehow both. Not one outcome, but many, coexisting in a delicate balance. And then something happens. The moment you try to observe them, they change. Not gradually, not predictably, instantly. That wide range of possibilities collapses into a single result. The particle appears in one place with one defined state, as if it had always been that way. But it had not. Just before observation, it was something else entirely. This is not just measurement affecting the system in a physical way. It is deeper than that. Because even when the measurement is designed to be as gentle as possible, even when the interaction is minimized, the result is the same. The act of observing does not simply reveal reality, it selects it. This is where the shift occurs. Observation is no longer passive. It becomes an active part of the process, a participant in the unfolding of reality itself. And this raises a question that changes everything. If observing something determines how it exists, then what role are we really playing in the universe? Are we discovering reality? Or are we, in some subtle and unavoidable way, helping to shape it? This is not a comfortable idea. It challenges the boundary between subject and object, between the observer and the observed. It suggests that the universe is not a finished picture we are looking at, but something more fluid, something that responds. And once that boundary begins to dissolve, it becomes difficult to say where reality ends and observation begins. Because if the act of looking changes what is seen, then every observation is also an interaction. Every measurement is a decision. Every moment of awareness is, in some sense, a contribution. And this leads to a deeper, more unsettling realization. If observation is participation, then reality is not something happening outside of us. It is something we are entangled with. The experiment that rewrites cause and effect. There is a rule so deeply embedded in our understanding of reality that we rarely think about it. Causes come before effects. A decision leads to an action. An action produces a result. The past shapes the present, and the present moves forward into the future. This sequence feels unbreakable, almost sacred. It is the structure that allows us to make sense of everything. But there are experiments where this rule begins to fail. In certain quantum setups, particles are sent through a system where they could behave in more than one way. The critical detail is this: the choice of how to measure the particle is made after it has already passed through part of the system. By all logic, the particle should have already decided how to behave. Its path should be fixed, its history should be complete. But that is not what happens. When the measurement is finally made, the result suggests that the particle's earlier behavior somehow aligns with that later choice, as if the way you decide to observe it now reaches back and determines what it did before. This is not a small anomaly. It is a direct challenge to the flow of time itself. It is as though the timeline is not a straight line, but something more flexible, something that can adjust, rearrange, or even redefine events depending on how they are ultimately observed. Imagine watching a story where the ending changes the beginning. Not metaphorically, but physically. The past is no longer fixed. It becomes something that can be influenced, shaped, or completed by decisions made in the present. This is the unsettling implication. If these results are taken seriously, then cause and effect are not as rigid as we believed. The universe does not simply unfold from past to future. It may operate in a way where the future plays a role in defining the past. And if that is true, then reality is not being written in a single direction. It is being constructed from multiple directions at once. This forces us to confront a possibility that feels almost impossible to accept. What if the events we think have already happened are not fully determined until they are observed? What if the past itself is not as permanent as we imagine? And if time can be influenced in this way, even at the smallest scales, then the question is no longer just about particles or experiments. The question becomes much larger. What does it mean to live in a universe where the order of events is not as fixed as it seems? The silence between measurements. There is something even more unsettling than what we observe. It is what happens when we are not observing at all. In every experiment, there are moments of interaction, of measurement, of defined outcomes. But between those moments, there is silence. A gap where no one is looking, no device is recording, no interaction is taking place. And it is within that silence that the deepest mystery begins to emerge. Because when a system is not being observed, it does not behave like something with a clear, stable state. It does not settle into a single configuration. Instead, it remains suspended in a range of possibilities, as if reality itself refuses to choose. Not hidden, not unknown, undefined. This is difficult to accept because it contradicts everything we instinctively believe. We imagine the world continuing in a consistent way, even when we are not paying attention. That objects remain where they are, that events proceed as they should, that reality unfolds regardless of our awareness. But at the most fundamental level, this continuity is not guaranteed. Between measurements, reality does not seem to carry a single continuous story. It exists as a collection of potential outcomes, none of which are fully realized until something forces a resolution. This means that the universe, in those silent intervals, may not be what we think it is, not a sequence of events, not a fixed structure, but something more like a field of possibilities, waiting for interaction, waiting for definition, waiting in a way that feels almost deliberate for the moment when uncertainty gives way to certainty. And this leads to a question that is far more unsettling than any experimental result. If reality is undefined when it is not being observed, then what is the universe doing right now, in all the places no one is looking? Not metaphorically, but literally. In the vast emptiness between stars, in regions of space untouched by measurement, in systems that have never been observed, does reality exist in the way we imagine? Or is it something incomplete, something unresolved, something that only becomes real when it is brought into interaction? This is where the silence becomes difficult to ignore, because it suggests that reality is not continuously on in the way we experience it. It flickers, not in a way we can see, not in a way we can directly measure, but in a deeper sense. A dependence on observation that introduces gaps, intervals, moments where existence itself may not be fully defined. And if that is true, then the universe is not a constant presence. It is something that stabilizes, only when it is observed. the collapse that shouldn't be real. At the heart of everything we have explored so far, there is a moment that should not exist, a moment where possibility becomes reality. Before observation, a particle is not in one place. It is not in one state. It exists as a spread of probabilities, a range of potential outcomes that all coexist in a delicate balance. Not hidden, not waiting behind a curtain, but genuinely present at the same time. And then, without warning, that entire structure collapses. One outcome remains. The rest disappear. This is known as collapse, but that word hides the true strangeness of what is happening. Because nothing physically crashes or breaks. There is no visible mechanism, no clear process that explains how multiple possibilities reduce to a single reality. It just happens, instantly, completely, without transition. And that is the problem, because in every other part of science, change is continuous. Systems evolve over time. Causes lead to effects through processes we can trace. But here, at the most fundamental level, that continuity is gone. There is no gradual shift from many possibilities to one. There is only a sudden selection, as if reality itself makes a decision. This creates a gap in our understanding that cannot be easily filled. What causes the collapse? What determines which outcome becomes real? Why does the presence of observation seem to trigger it, even when the mechanism remains unknown? These are not minor questions. They strike at the core of how reality functions. Some interpretations suggest that the collapse is not a physical event at all, but a reflection of our interaction with the system. Others propose that all possibilities continue to exist, branching into separate realities beyond our perception. And some go even further, questioning whether collapse is something that happens in the world or something that happens in our knowledge of it. But none of these explanations fully resolve the tension, because the fact remains. Before observation, reality is not singular. After observation, it is. Something happens in that transition that we do not understand, something that breaks the smooth continuity we expect from the universe. And this is where the discomfort deepens. If reality requires a collapse to become definite, then what we experience as a solid, consistent world is built on countless moments of selection, countless invisible transitions where possibility is reduced to certainty. Not once, not occasionally, but constantly. Every interaction, every measurement, every moment of awareness. Reality, as we perceive it, may not be a continuous flow. It may be the result of endless collapses happening beneath the surface, stitching together a world that only appears stable. And if that is true, then what we call reality is not a fixed structure. It is something that is being resolved again and again. The possibility that space is not fundamental. Up to this point, the strangeness has lived within particles, measurements, and moments of observation. But there is a deeper layer, one that feels far more destabilizing, because it does not question how things behave. It questions where they exist. We have always assumed that space is the stage on which reality unfolds, a vast, invisible framework where objects move, interact, and exist independently of one another. Space feels continuous, stable, and ever-present. But what if space is not the stage at all? What if it is something that emerges only after deeper processes take place? In some of the most advanced theories in physics, space is no longer treated as fundamental. It is not the base layer of reality. Instead, it appears to arise from relationships, from connections, from something more abstract and less intuitive than distance or position. In these models, the idea of here and there loses its meaning at the deepest level. 2 points in space may not be separated by distance in the way we imagine. Instead, they may be connected through underlying structures that do not obey our usual sense of geometry. What appears far apart could be deeply linked. What appears close could be fundamentally unrelated. Space, in this view, is not something that exists first. It is something that forms out of interactions, forms out of information, forms as a result of deeper processes that do not resemble anything we experience in everyday life. And this changes everything. Because if space is not fundamental, then location is not fundamental. Separation is not fundamental. The very idea that objects exist somewhere may be a surface-level illusion, emerging only after reality has already taken shape in a way we cannot directly perceive. This also sheds new light on the strange behaviors we have already seen. If particles can influence each other across distances, if outcomes seem connected in ways that ignore space, perhaps it is not that information is traveling faster than light. Perhaps, at the deepest level, there is no distance to cross. This is where the structure of reality begins to feel less like a physical landscape and more like a network. Not a place, but a system of relationships. Not a container, but a result. And if space itself is something that emerges, then the universe is not sitting inside a vast emptiness. It is generating that emptiness as it goes, which leads to a question that is difficult to fully grasp. If space is not the foundation of reality, then what is? And whatever that answer is, it must exist beyond distance, beyond position, beyond anything we can point to and say, this is where it is, because it may not be anywhere at all. The hidden architecture beneath the universe. If space is not the foundation, then something else must be. Something deeper, something more abstract, something that does not look like matter, energy, or anything we can directly observe. And this is where the idea of a hidden architecture begins to emerge. Not a structure made of particles, not a framework of distances, but a system of relationships. A network where what matters is not where things are, but how they are connected. In this view, reality is not built from objects. It is built from information. Every particle, every interaction, every event becomes part of a vast web, where the fundamental layer is not physical in the traditional sense. It is relational. It is defined by connections, correlations, and patterns that exist beneath what we perceive as the visible universe. What we experience as reality, space, time, movement, may be the surface expression of this deeper structure, like an image projected from something more complex beneath it. This begins to explain why certain phenomena feel so strange, why particles remain connected across distance, why outcomes seem coordinated without a clear path of communication, why reality appears to choose a state only when it is observed. Because beneath all of this, there may be a level where separation does not exist, a level where everything is already connected, not through space, not through signals, but through the structure itself. This hidden architecture does not need to send information from one place to another, because at its deepest level, there may be no places at all, only relationships, only patterns, only a kind of underlying order that gives rise to everything we see, but is never directly visible. And this leads to a realization that is both elegant and unsettling. What we call reality may not be made of things. It may be made of connections. Connections that define how the universe behaves, how it evolves, how it responds. Connections that exist before space, before time, before anything we can measure. And if that is true, then the universe is not a collection of separate objects moving through an empty void. It is a unified system, expressing itself in ways that only appear fragmented when viewed from our limited perspective, which raises a deeper question. If everything is connected at the most fundamental level, then what role does the observer play within that network? Because if observation changes outcomes and outcomes are rooted in connections, then observation itself may be part of the architecture, not outside it, not separate from it, but woven into the very fabric that gives reality its form. The observer problem no one can solve. At some point, the question becomes unavoidable. If observation plays such a critical role in shaping reality, then what exactly is an observer? It sounds simple at first. An observer is something that measures, that interacts, that records information. A device, a detector, a system that captures an outcome. But the deeper you look, the less clear it becomes. Because every measuring device is made of particles. Every system follows the same physical laws as the thing it is observing. And if those particles also exist in multiple possibilities before being observed, then who or what is actually completing the process? Where does the chain end? You can place a detector to observe a particle, then another system to observe the detector, then another to observe that system. Each layer adds complexity, but it does not resolve the problem. It only pushes it further back. At some point, something must turn possibility into reality. Something must define a single outcome. But physics, as it currently stands, does not clearly tell us what that something is. Some interpretations suggest that any interaction is enough, that no conscious observer is required. Others hint that consciousness itself may play a role, that awareness might be the final step in the process. This is where discomfort begins to grow, because if consciousness is involved, even indirectly, then the boundary between mind and reality begins to dissolve. The observer is no longer outside the system. It becomes part of the mechanism that defines it. And yet, this idea is deeply controversial. Science has always tried to separate the observer from the observed, to maintain objectivity, to ensure that reality can be studied without influence from subjective experience. But here, at the edge of our understanding, that separation is no longer clear. It may not even be possible. The observer problem is not just a technical issue. It is a conceptual fracture, a place where our models stop giving clear answers and begin to reveal their limits. Because we do not know what qualifies as an observer. We do not know where observation truly begins, and we do not know what ultimately causes reality to settle into a single state. But we do know this. Without observation, reality behaves one way. With observation, it behaves another. And in between those two states lies a question that no one has been able to fully answer. What is it that turns possibility into fact? Until that question is resolved, every experiment, every theory, every attempt to describe the universe carries a quiet uncertainty, not about what we are seeing, but about what it means to see it all, the fear of a reality that depends on us. There is a moment when you follow these ideas far enough where the science stops feeling distant and begins to feel personal. Because if observation is not passive, if it plays a role in shaping what becomes real, then the boundary between the universe and your experience of it is no longer clear. It is no longer just about particles or experiments. It is about you. The idea that reality might depend, even in part, on observation introduces a quiet tension. Not dramatic, not immediate, but persistent. A sense that the world is not entirely fixed, that it does not fully exist in the way we were taught. That something about it is unfinished. We are used to thinking of ourselves as small within the universe, observers of something vast, something indifferent, something that would continue exactly the same way whether we were here or not. But this possibility suggests something different, that the act of observing is not separate from reality, that awareness is not outside the system, that what you perceive is not just a reflection of the world, but part of the process that defines it. This is where discomfort begins to deepen, because if reality depends on observation, then there is no longer a clear version of the universe that exists independently of interaction. There is no fully formed world out there waiting to be discovered in its final state. Instead, there may be a range of possibilities constantly resolving into what we experience, and that means something profound. It means that certainty is not built into the fabric of reality. It is created, moment by moment, not by intention, not by control, but through interaction, through measurement, through awareness itself. This does not mean that you control reality. It is not that simple and not that comfortable. But it does mean that reality may not be entirely separate from the act of experiencing it. And that changes the way the universe feels. Less like a fixed structure, more like a process unfolding. A process that includes you, whether you want it to or not. This is where the fear quietly emerges. Not fear in the sense of danger, but in the sense of instability. A loss of the solid ground we believed we were standing on. Because if reality is not fully defined without observation, then there is no completely objective version of it. Only versions that become real through interaction. And once you begin to see the universe this way, it becomes difficult to return to the old assumption that everything simply exists, unchanged, independent, and complete. Because now, there is always a question in the background, a subtle uncertainty that follows every moment of perception. If reality depends on observation, then what part of it is still unresolved? The edge where science becomes philosophy. There is a boundary that science has always tried to avoid, a line where equations stop giving clear answers, where experiments raise questions they cannot fully resolve, where the language of measurement begins to lose its precision. For a long time, that boundary felt distant. Philosophy was something separate, something abstract, something that existed outside the rigorous world of data and observation. But now, that line is no longer far away. It is here. Because the deeper we go into the structure of reality, the more we encounter questions that cannot be answered by measurement alone. Questions about existence, about observation, about what it means for something to be real. Science can describe behavior. It can predict outcomes. It can model interactions with extraordinary accuracy. But when it comes to explaining what those behaviors mean, it begins to hesitate. What is a particle before it is observed? What is time if cause and effect can be reversed? What is space if distance is not fundamental? And perhaps most importantly, what is reality if it does not exist independently of observation? These are not just technical questions. They are philosophical ones, and they are emerging not from speculation, but from the results of real experiments. This is where the discomfort deepens into something more profound. Because science is no longer just uncovering how the universe works. It is being forced to ask what the universe is. And that question does not have a clear answer. Different interpretations attempt to resolve the tension in different ways. Some suggest that reality splits into multiple versions, each equally real. Others propose that there is a deeper deterministic layer hidden beneath the randomness. And some accept that uncertainty is not a limitation of our knowledge, but a fundamental feature of existence. But none of these interpretations can be directly tested. They exist at the edge, at the point where science reaches its limits and philosophy begins. This does not mean that science has failed. It means that we have reached a depth where understanding requires more than measurement. It requires interpretation. It requires perspective. It requires us to confront the possibility that reality is not something that can be fully captured by equations alone. And this changes the role of science itself, from a tool that reveals certainty to a process that exposes mystery. Because at this edge, the universe is no longer just something we analyze. It is something we are trying to understand in a much deeper sense. Not just how it behaves, but what it is. And the closer we get to that answer, the more it seems to slip beyond the reach of clear definition. As if reality, at its deepest level, resists being fully understood. The universe that watches back. There is one final possibility that lingers beneath everything we have explored. It does not come from a single experiment or a single theory. It emerges slowly, as a pattern, as a question that becomes harder to ignore the deeper you go. If observation plays a role in shaping reality, then what does it mean to observe? We have assumed that observation flows in one direction, that we look at the universe, measure it, define it, and in doing so, bring parts of it into reality. A one-sided relationship, where we are the ones asking the questions and the universe responds. But what if that is not the full picture? What if observation is not a one-way process? Because if reality responds to interaction, if outcomes depend on how they are observed, if the structure of the universe is built on relationships rather than isolated objects, then observation itself may not belong solely to us. It may be something more fundamental, something embedded in the fabric of reality itself. This does not mean the universe is conscious in the way we understand consciousness. It does not mean it is thinking or aware or watching with intention, but it does suggest something quieter and perhaps more unsettling. That the act of observation may be a property of the universe, not just a function of the observer. That what we experience as awareness might be part of a deeper process, one that does not begin or end with us. Because if reality is shaped through interaction, then every interaction is a form of mutual definition. Not just us observing the universe, but the universe, in some sense, defining itself through us and through everything else that interacts within it. This is where the idea begins to shift. You are not standing outside the universe, looking in. You are part of the process through which it becomes real. Every moment of perception, every interaction, every measurement is not just revealing what exists, it is participating in it. And if that is true, then the universe is not a finished structure waiting to be explored. It is something ongoing, something that is, in a very real sense, still unfolding. Not just out there, in distant galaxies or hidden layers of physics, but here, through every act of observation, through every moment of awareness, which leads to a final question that does not resolve, but remains. If reality depends on observation, and observation is part of the universe itself, then who, or what, is truly observing?